It's now 6 days since the centre of Mexico City was devastated by an earthquake. But still today, 2 newborn babies were brought out alive from under the rubble. Officials say the death toll is approaching 5,000. Unofficial estimates put the number killed at more than double that. The latest pictures show the moments that are bringing the greatest joy to the exhausted rescue workers, the discovery of the babies who, although totally helpless, have survived the disaster. They were found under the ruins of what was Mexico City's leading hospital.
Well, one of this country's top child specialists says there could still be more babies to be found alive under the rubble of Mexico City. And he says rescuers should not abandon the search for survivors of the earthquake. This report from our science correspondent, James Wilkinson.
In London today, child specialists were not particularly surprised that babies are being pulled out of the rubble alive 4 and 5 days after the earthquake. Newborn babies, it seems, are far more resilient than one might think.
The way to look at it is to look at the trees in a forest where you've got old oaks and you've got young saplings. You then have a storm, and it's the old oaks that go crashing over, and it's the young saplings that bend because they're flexible and they bend in the storm. And this is the way that babies and small children will respond to a serious disaster of this kind.
Some of those babies have been under that rubble for 4 or 5 days. Now, how is it they can survive so long without any food or water?
It seems like a long time, but then a newborn baby normally doesn't eat very much anyway for the first 2 days. And nature, if you like, has designed it that way because the milk doesn't seem to come in for 2 or 3 days anyway if the baby's going to be breastfed.
Presumably they wouldn't be moving around very much, so they wouldn't require much energy.
They don't move around very much, but then of course they do cry very lustily, and this could be quite an advantage in a disaster because the baby is going to make more noise for its size than anybody else. And if adults and babies are competing with their voices for attention, the babies are going to win every time.
Are the babies more likely or less likely to suffer from shock following an earthquake?
I think probably less likely. To begin with, they don't have the mental trauma. You know, I think a baby isn't going to find itself at the bottom of a building and worry about itself being in that terrible position, whereas a grown-up is obviously going to be quite overcome at the very thought of having a tower block on top of his head.
Now, the earthquake was 4 or 5 days ago. How much longer do you think babies that might still be buried could they survive?
Oh, I'm sure they should go on looking for at least another 4 or 5 days. It sounds extraordinary, but I'm sure they should.